This car could have revolutionised international motor racing if it had actually worked. It was built by Welter Racing and it was far ahead of its time, but it never got to start a race. If it had done so, it would have brought hydrogen power to the Le Mans 24 Hours. This is the story of the Green GT H2. At the 2011 Le Mans 24 Hours, it was announced that the Delta Wing was granted the new 56th garage entry slot for the following year's race. To get that entry, it beat off competition from two other cars, an all-electric entry from Courage Competition and the Green GT, a new car built by Welter Racing. The Green GT was a hugely innovative design, which would have seen a hydrogen fuel cell power unit entered into a major motor race for the very first time. It impressed the Le Mans organisers so much so that they invited it to take part in the pre-race test day ahead of the 2012 Le Mans 24 Hours, at least if you believe some of the media material, that is. The car turned up and it was officially unveiled by Pierre Fillon in front of a rather shocked media in a very, very hot tent at the track. But unfortunately, it didn't actually run. The car, in fact, didn't work at all at this point, and despite this, it was granted the Garage 56 entry slot for the 2013 Le Mans 24 Hours. The Green GT was the second car from a Swiss-based organisation of the same name. The first was an all-electric sports prototype built around an old Norma FIA CN chassis. It was capable of running at really quite high speeds, but it simply didn't have the range to be a serious racing car. So to address this problem with the range of the car, the Green GT team made an interesting decision. They opted to build an electricity generating power station into the car. In other words, a hydrogen fuel cell. The car was to use a very small polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell. Google it if you want to know more about that. The fuel cell was mounted in the same position as you would find an engine on a conventional Le Mans prototype, but the installation was not at all stressed. To work, the fuel cell would need two things, hydrogen and air. Let's start with the hydrogen and come back to the air. The hydrogen was stored in large tanks on either side of the monocoque of the car, each of them at 160 litres capacity, and they each weighed about 4 kilograms. The original idea was to swap the fuel tanks in the pits during the race and then refuel them in the paddock in a safe area. However, a liquid hydrogen refueling system was also being developed, and it wasn't clear which version the team would finally go for if the car had actually got into racing condition. Because the energy density required was pretty high with the liquid hydrogen, the tanks were pressurized to 350 bar. The exposed tanks caused a lot of concern for many in the motorsport community. Many raised questions like what would happen if high pressure hydrogen tanks got punctured during a crash, and comparisons were made to the Hindenburg disaster. While that was a little bit unkind, the concerns were very valid. Green GT argued that the tanks on the car were actually quite safe despite their exposed position. They were made of an aluminium and carbon fibre construction and apparently offered 3 to 10 times the strength of an FIA homologated monocoque. Not everybody was really that convinced. The second thing the fuel cell would need was air, and that would be responsible in part for the Green GT's wild look. The fuel cell would be fed by a pair of compressors, one mounted either side of the chassis. These compressors gave the car a really distinctive sound. It was a bit like an aircraft taking off. Just have a listen to this. The distinctive feature of the car, though, was a huge air scoop sat above the conventional rollover structures on the chassis. It made the car much higher than other Le Mans prototypes. This big air scoop was needed in order to keep the fuel cell operating properly. It needed huge heat exchangers in order to sit at its operational temperature of 80 degrees centigrade. So that huge scoop fed those coolers, which were behind the main monocoque, and the air exited the car via the huge louvres behind it. The electricity generated generated by the fuel cell powered twin 200 kilowatt Brucer electric motors, which together produced about 4,000 Newton meters of torque at the rear wheels. The Green GT team believed that this would give the car slightly better performance than the fastest GTE specification cars. The chassis of the car and its rather quirky aerodynamic package was developed by Welter Racing. They used the St Cyr full-scale wind tunnel in France to define the aerodynamic package and try to tackle the huge amount of aerodynamic drag which came as a result of that large cooling system. In general, the overall design of the racing car was fairly conventional. It had a distinctive raised nose with non-structural elements either side of it linking to the wheel arches. In the wind tunnel, without those link sections fitted, you can actually see that this raised nose concept is really very similar to that used on the unfinished Welter Racing LMP1, which followed this project on, and that later became the WR biomethane car. The front splitter also has similarities to that design. Unlike the biomethane car, the Green GT was open-topped and the conventional roll hoops can be seen here. The rear wing of the car was a twin element design and it was mounted very low down. It was a little bit reminiscent actually of some earlier WR designs. Again, it's all about reducing aerodynamic drag. Under the bodywork, the chassis was again quite a conventional design in many respects, though not in others. It had a double wishbone suspension layout all round with pushrod actuated spring and damper units. There was no conventional gearbox on the car, however, and the rear suspension picked up on a large machined metal carrier, which also housed the electric motors and the apparently patented electronic torque vectoring differential. Curiously though, this car essentially had two monocoque chassis. There was the conventional Le Mans prototype chassis, the front bit up to the roll hoops and rear bulkhead, and then a second trailing chassis housing the fuel cell. You can see in this image how the hydrogen tanks were mounted outside both of those monocoques. The overall weight of the car was around 1,240 kilograms, slightly more than a front-running GTE car. So with more power, a lot more torque, and a slightly higher weight, the performance of the Green GT should have achieved roughly what it was meant to by running at around the pace of the front-running GTE cars. Depending on which document from Green GT you care to look at, the car would have been able to run between 30 or 40 minutes between pit stops, where it would have had to have had its hydrogen tanks refilled or replaced. It should have had a top speed of around 300 kph despite all of that aerodynamic drag. When the Green GT was launched at Le Mans in 2012, the team stated that it wanted to reduce the weight of the car down to 1,000 kilograms in time for its race debut at the 2013 Spa 6 Hours, a race they planned to enter in preparation for the Le Mans 24 Hours. They also wanted to extend its range up to 1 hour of running and the car still be capable of a sub 4 minute lap time, so again, just about front running GTE pace. Those objectives weren't met. The apparent first track test of the car came a little after the Le Mans launch, but the car missed its scheduled first public track debut, which was meant to be at the Silverstone 6 Hours in 2012. That never happened. The team were keen to show off the sheer number of innovations featured on the car. In fact, they even published a list of them. But perhaps overall the project was a bit too innovative. It didn't seem like the car actually worked at all. To dispel the many doubts that people in the media and the wider motorsport industry had about the car, Green GT issued some images of what looked like the car running on track in Switzerland, but many suspected those shots had actually been posed. In some of those photographs which were issued of the apparent first track test, the wheels on the car didn't actually appear to be turning, and some people even questioned whether it was a real driver in the car. And it soon leaked out that the team was actually struggling to get the car to work consistently in a safe and stable state. And with that in mind, nobody was too surprised when Green GT withdrew their entry from the 2013 Le Mans 24 Hours, and there would also be no Garage 56 entry slot for it in 2014. Nissan had already taken that with its Zeod electric hybrid car. We'll get back to that one. After that, the car was sort of forgotten by most people, but the project hadn't actually stopped, and the Green GT H2 reappeared in 2015 with a brand new paint job, but otherwise visually pretty much the same as it was. Crucially though, the car was now properly in running condition, and it made its public debut at the Castellet circuit ahead of a more serious effort to get the car out on track and running at decent speeds. Michelin notably had replaced Dunlop up as not only a commercial partner of the project, but also its tyre supplier. However, that Garage 56 entry at the 2015 Le Mans 24 Hours proved elusive, and the Green GT wouldn't be entered for the 2016 Le Mans 24 Hours either, though it would do a demonstration lap. It wasn't a particularly fast lap. Watching the onboard footage, it takes about 5.5 minutes for the car to get around the complete lap, and it was clear from that Olivier Panis wasn't really pushing the car, as there were other cars out on track doing parade runs at the same time. By this point though, Green GT admitted that it no longer had any plans to race the H2. It had built an all-new car with Pininfarina, and that was aimed at being a track day special or a high-performance road car. That was called the H2 Speed, and was very much not aimed at racing. Today, hydrogen-fueled motor racing is very much on the agenda at the Le Mans 24 Hours, and the Green GT project essentially morphed into, or maybe was more replaced by, the Mission H24 project, which has already built 2 running prototypes and shown off a 3rd spectacular concept, potentially pointing to the direction that Le Mans 24 Hours will take in future. Ahead of the 2025 Le Mans 24 Hours, Toyota revealed the latest iteration of this Mission H24 project, the Toyota GR LH2. But all of these cars are other stories, and we will tell those stories soon. So if you've enjoyed this long-distance gaseous exchange, then please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon somewhere in the pit lane. This video was only meant to be 5 minutes long. Blimey.